So yes, let's start. From the #1 New York Times best-selling author of The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. Chapter 1. So the book contains around 10 chapters. So we will just be going through the chapters. So chapter 1 is about the flowering of human consciousness. Chapter 2 is on ego, the current state of humanity. Chapter 3 talks about the core of ego. Chapter 4 talks about role playing, the many faces of the ego. And chapter 5 talks about the pain body. Chapter 6, breaking free. Chapter 7 talks about finding who you truly are. And chapter 8 talks about the discovery of inner space. Chapter 9 talks about your inner purpose. And chapter 10 talks about a new earth. So, chapter 1, the flowering of human consciousness, evocation. Earth, 114 million years ago, one morning just after sunrise, the first flower ever to appear on the planet opens up to receive the rays of the sun. Prior to this momentous event that heralds an evolutionary transformation in the life of plants, the planet had already been covered in vegetation for millions of years. The first flower probably did not survive for long, and flowers must have remained rare and isolated phenomena. Since conditions were most likely not yet favorable for a widespread flowering to occur, one day, however, a critical threshold was reached, and suddenly there would have been an explosion of color and scent all over the planet. If a perceiving consciousness had been there to witness it. Much later, those delicate and fragrant beings we call flowers would come to play an essential part in the evolution of the consciousness of another species. Humans would increasingly be drawn to and fascinated by them as the consciousness of human beings developed. Flowers were most likely the first thing they came to value that had no utilitarian purpose for them. That is to say, was not linked in some way to survival. They provided inspiration to countless artists, poets, and mystics. Jesus tells us to contemplate the flowers and learn from them how to live. The Buddha is said to have given a silent sermon once during which he held up a flower and gazed at it. After a while, one of those present, a monk called Mahakaspya, began to smile. He is said to have been the only one who had understood the sermon. According to legend, that smile, that is to say, realization, was handed down by 28 successive masters and much later became the origin of Zen. Seeing beauty in a flower could awaken humans, however, briefly to the beauty that is an essential part of their own innermost being, their true nature. The first recognition of beauty was one of the most significant events in the evolution of human consciousness. The feelings of joy and love are intrinsically connected to that recognition. Without our fully realizing it, flowers would become for us an expression in the form of that which is not, which is most high, most sacred, and ultimately formless within ourselves. Flowers, more fleeting, more eternal, and more delicate than the plants out of which they emerged, would become like messengers from another realm, like a bridge between the physical forms and the formless. They not only had a scent that was delicate and pleasing to humans, but also brought a fragrance from the realm of spirit. Using the word enlightenment in a wider sense than the conventionally accepted one, we could look upon flowers as the enlightenment of plants. Any life form in any realm, mineral, vegetable, animal, or human, can be said to undergo enlightenment. It is, however, an extremely rare occurrence since it is more than an evolutionary progression. It also implies a discontinuity in its development, a leap to an entirely different level of being, and most important, a lessening of material ability. What could be heavier and more impenetrable than a rock, the densest of all forms? And yet, some rocks undergo a change in their molecular structure, turn into crystals, and so become transparent to the light. Some carbons, under inconceivable heat and pressure, turn into diamonds, and some heavy minerals into other precious stones. Most crawling reptilians, the most earthbound of all creatures, have remained unchanged for millions of years. Some, however, grew feathers and wings and turned into birds, thus defying the force of gravity that had held them for so long. They didn't become better at crawling or walking, but transcended crawling and walking entirely. Since time immemorial, flowers, crystals, precious stones, and birds have held special significance for the human spirit. Like all life forms, they are, of course, temporary manifestations of the underlying one life, one consciousness. Their special significance and the reason why humans feel such fascination for and affinity with them can be attributed to their ethereal quality. Once there is a certain degree of presence, of still and alert attention in human beings' perceptions, they can sense the divine life essence, the one indwelling consciousness or spirit in every creature, every life form. Recognize it as one with their own essence, and so love it as themselves. Until this happens, however, most humans see only the outer forms, unaware of the inner essence, just as they are unaware of their own essence and identify only with their own physical and psychological form. In the case of a flower, a crystal, precious stone, or bird, however, even someone with little or no presence can occasionally sense that there is more than the mere physical existence of that form without knowing that this is the reason why he or she is drawn toward it, feels an affinity with it. Because of its eternal nature, its form obscures the indwelling spirit to a lesser degree than in the case of other life forms. The exception to this are all new life forms, babies, puppies, kittens, lambs, and so on. They are fragile, delicate, yet not yet firmly established in materiality, and innocence, a sweetness and beauty that are not of this world still shine through them. They delight even relatively insensitive humans. So, what is the author trying to tell us here? He's trying to tell us that flowers, they have such an amazing aroma. And one of the major reasons why they probably came in last was to tell humans that, not everything is about survival. And that is one of the major reasons why we don't offer a lot of other things, but flowers are one common thing which we offer to God. और हम कभी उस फ्लावर को अपने डेली कंजम्पशन में ज्यादा यूज नहीं करते, बट या इट्स देयर टू enhance the beauty. Always, it's always about enhancing the experience, the ambience, enhancing the aroma. So everything about flower is all about enhancement. But whereas when we talk about humans and our presence here on this school of earth, on this earth curriculum as we call it, everything right now has moved into the materialistic form. Har ek cheez, I mean, majority of everyone is looking for happiness from anything which is external. Whereas anything and everything that is external is never permanent, because everything is changing. So till the time that new gadget, new thing, new car, new toy, whatever it is, it will give you a sense of that happiness with what we call, which seems like happy, and we really enjoy it. So हम वो materialistic चीजों में ना happiness को ढूंढ रहे हैं, whereas happiness is the true state of our being. और वो realization of that true self of ours, or the realization of who we really are, and getting to know that happiness from within, it is because of that thing inside of everyone present that we are trying to look for it outside. That is why if you do a lot of cases, when we do something or we buy something or we get something materialistic, we feel very nice, because deep down the soul knows that I am looking for happiness. इसीलिए वो गैजेट या वो मटेरियलिस्टिक थिंग हमें अच्छी लगती है, एंड वी आर ड्रॉन टुवर्ड्स इट एंड वी फील नाइस, बिकॉज दैट इज आवर ट्रू नेचर. But anything and everything that is external is never permanent and will keep changing. So till that time we do not shift our association of true happiness from what is outside in the materialistic world to what is truly inside of us, tab tak wo happiness would always be an off and on phenomena, a temporary phenomena. Because what we're trying to seek is something which is not permanent, not eternal. It's going to change. But who we are as a soul is the only thing that is eternal, that will never die. What dies is this body. What goes away is this mind. So what is truly ours and the true state of our being is that flower which derives its essence from within. So the whole concept of deriving or getting that, being on that state of happiness, which is our actual true state, is to feel that inner essence of the soul, to feel that inner essence of who we truly are. Wahi eternal hai. That is not going to change. This body will change. Anything outside of us is not permanent. It's not eternal. It will change. So वो association से हमें लगता है कि हमें अच्छा लग रहा है, but that has a life, that has a validity, expiry. But what does not have a validity or expiry is what is truly eternal. And truly eternal, without any validity, without any expiry, is your own true inner self. That's the soul. That is what we need to get connected to in order to realize who we truly are and to have that experience of our innate state of love, compassion, and happiness. So, when you alert and contemplate a flower, crystal, or bird without naming it mentally, it becomes a window for you into the formless. There is an inner opening, however slight, into the realm of spirit. This is why these three enlightened life forms have played such an important part in the evolution of human consciousness since ancient times. Why, for example, the jewel in the lotus flower is a central symbol of Buddhism, and a white bird, the dove, signifies the Holy Spirit in Christianity. They have been preparing the ground for a more profound shift in planetary consciousness that is destined to take place in the human species. This is the spiritual awakening that we are beginning to witness now. The purpose of this book is humanity ready for a transformation of consciousness and inner flowering so radical and profound that compared to it, the flowering of plants, no matter how beautiful, is only a pale reflection? Can human beings lose the density of their conditioned mind structures and become like crystals or precious stones, so to speak, transparent to the light of consciousness? Can they defy the gravitational pull of materialism and materiality and rise above identification with form that keeps the ego in place and condemns them to imprisonment within their own personality? The possibility of such a transformation has been the central message of the great wisdom teachings of humankind. The messengers, Buddha, Jesus, and others, not all of them known, were humanity's early flowers. They were precursors, rare and precious beings. A widespread flowering was not yet possible at that time, and their message became largely misunderstood and often greatly distorted. It certainly did not transform human behavior except in a small minority of people. Is humanity more ready now than at the time of those early teachers? Why should this be so? What can you do, if anything, to bring about or accelerate this inner shift? What is it that characterizes the old egoic state of consciousness, and by what signs is this new emerging consciousness recognized? These and other essential questions will be addressed in this book. More important, this book itself is a transformational device that has come out of the arising new consciousness. The ideas and concepts presented here may be important, but they are secondary. They are no more than signposts pointing towards awakening. As you read, a shift takes place within you. This book's main purpose is not to add new information or beliefs to your mind or try to convince you of anything, but to bring about a shift in consciousness. That is to say, to awaken. In that sense, this book is not interesting. Interesting means you can keep your distance, play around with ideas and concepts in your mind, agree or disagree. This book is about you. It will change your state of consciousness or it will be meaningless. It can only awaken those who are ready. Not everyone is ready yet, but many are. And with each person who awakens, the momentum in the collective consciousness grows and it becomes easier for others. If you don't know what awakening means, read on. Only by awakening can you know the true meaning of that word. A glimpse is enough to initiate the awakening process, which is irreversible. For some, the glimpse will come while reading this book. For many others who may not even have realized it, the process has already begun. This book will help you recognize it. For some, it may have begun through loss or suffering. For others, through coming into contact with a spiritual teacher or teachings, through reading The Power of Now or some other spiritually alive and therefore transformational book, or any combination of the above. If the awakening process has begun in you, the reading of this book will accelerate and intensify it. An essential part of the awakening is the recognition of the unawakened you, the ego as it thinks, speaks, and acts, as well as the recognition of the collectively conditioned mental processes that perpetuate the unawakened state. This is why this book shows the main aspects of the ego and how they operate in the individual as well as in the collective. This is important for two related reasons. The first is that unless you know the basic mechanics behind the working of the ego, you won't recognize it, and it will trick you into identifying with it again and again. This means it takes you over an imposter pretending to be you. And the second reason is an act of recognition itself is one of the ways in which awakening happens. When you recognize the unconsciousness in you, that which makes the recognition possible is the arising consciousness, is awakening. You cannot fight the ego and win, just as you cannot fight against darkness. The light of consciousness is all that is necessary, and you are that light. So, this book is all about enhancing our level of consciousness and, in a sense, awakening us to see and recognize what is it that the ego is doing inside the mind. How is the egoistic mind playing tricks? And recognizing and awakening to your true self of who you truly are, and to realize, have that self realization of your true sense of being. So it awakens you to that by raising your level of consciousness, by raising the overall realm of the collective consciousness, by making you more and more aware. So in this entire process, be it this book, be it this spirituality, be it awakening, the key word of working or raising your consciousness, everything boils down to your awareness. How aware is the individual towards what is happening in the outside world, towards what is happening inside of you, towards what's happening inside your mind. So, the more you work on becoming a more aware individual or aware human being, the more you will be able to get connected to that true source in order to realize and experience who you truly are. And then slowly awaken your, awaken to that process, to that journey of discovering your true self. Our inherited dysfunction. If we look more deeply into humanity's ancient religions and spiritual traditions, we will find that underneath the many surface differences, there are two core insights that most of them agree on. The words they use to describe those insights differ, yet they all point to a twofold fundamental truth. The first part of the truth is the realization that the normal state of mind of most human beings contains a strong element of what we might call dysfunction or even madness. Certain teachings at the heart of Hinduism perhaps come closest to seeing this dysfunction as a form of collective mental illness. They call it Maya, the veil of delusion. Ramana Maharishi, one of the greatest Indian sages, bluntly states, the mind is Maya. Buddhism uses different terms. According to the Buddha, the human mind in its normal state generates dukkha, which can be translated as suffering, unsatisfactoriness, or just plain misery. He sees it as a characteristic of the human condition. Wherever you go, whatever you do, says the Buddha, you will encounter dukkha, and it will manifest in every situation sooner or later. According to Christian teachings, the normal collective state of humanity is one of original sin. Sin is a word that has been greatly misunderstood and misinterpreted. Literally translated from the ancient Greek in which the New Testament was written, to sin means to miss the mark. As an archer who misses the target, so to sin means to miss the point of human existence. It means to live unskillfully, blindly, and thus to suffer and cause suffering. Again, the term, stripped of its cultural baggage and misinterpretations, points to the dysfunction inherent in the human condition. The achievements of humanity are impressive and undeniable. We have created sublime works of music, literature, painting, architecture, and sculpture. More recently, science and technology have brought about radical changes in the way we live and have enabled us to do and create things that would have been considered miraculous even 200 years ago. No doubt, the human mind is highly intelligent, yet its very intelligence is tainted by madness. Science and technology have magnified the destructive impact that the dysfunction of the human mind has upon the planet, other life forms, and upon humans themselves. This is why the history of the 20th century is where that dysfunction, that collective insanity, can be most clearly recognized. A further factor is that this dysfunction is actually intensifying and accelerating. The First World War broke out in 1940. Destructive and cruel wars motivated by fear, greed, and the desire for power had been common occurrences throughout human history, as had slavery, torture, and widespread violence inflicted for religions and ideological reasons. Humans suffered more at the hands of each other than through natural disasters. By the year 1914, however, the highly intelligent human mind had invented not only the internal combustion engine, but also bombs, machine guns, submarines, flamethrowers, and poison gas. Intelligence in the service of madness. In static trench warfare in France and Belgium, millions of men perished to gain a few miles of mud. Well, when the war was over in 1918, the survivors look in horror and incomprehension upon the devastation left behind. 10 million human beings killed and many more maimed or disfigured. Never before had human madness been so destructive in its effect, so clearly visible. Little did they know that this was only the beginning. By the end of the century, the number of people who died a violent death at the hand of their fellow humans, would rise to more than 100 million. They died not only through wars between nations, but also through mass exterminations and genocide, such as the murder of 20 million class enemies, spies, and traitors in the Soviet Union under Stalin, or the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. They also died in countless small internal conflicts, such as the Spanish Civil War or during the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia, when a quarter of that country's population was murdered. We only need to watch the daily news on television to realize that the madness has not abated, that is continuing into the 21st century. Another aspect of the collective dysfunction of the human mind is the unprecedented violence that humans are inflicting on other life forms and the planet itself. The destruction of oxygen producing forests and other plants and animal life, ill treatment of animals in factory farms, and poisoning of rivers, oceans, and airs. Driven by greed, ignorant of their connectedness to the whole, humans persist in behavior that, if continued unchecked, can only result in their own destruction. The collective manifestations of the insanity that lies at the heart of the human condition constitute the greater part of human history. It is to a large extent a history of madness. If the history of humanity were the clinical case history of a single human being, the diagnosis would have to be chronic paranoid delusions, a pathological propensity to commit murder and acts of extreme violence and cruelty against his perceived enemies, his own unconsciousness projected outward, criminally insane with a few brief, lucid intervals.